So this week on the Stereo Image, we're lucky enough to be talking with the great Jeff Beal, famed Hollywood composer and composer of soundtracks and many great orchestral works. Thank you so much for coming on this week. I look forward to talking with you.
Thanks, Mike. It's really my pleasure.
Well, I'm going to jump right in. And, we mostly talk to people about just how music fits into their lives. But when it's someone like you, who is a composer, who music basically is your life, I like to just get an idea of what you're working on right now and what kind of exciting things are going on. And then I'll pick up some other stuff later on as we go through things. But
Sounds good.
so what are you doing now?
It's funny. There's always a lot of stuff going on. I think I have a bit of what you might think of as creative ADD. I like challenges and I like to stay busy. Music is a huge part of my life. I'll talk about what happened just recently because it was really some exciting stuff. I just got back from Los Angeles, where the LA Master Chorale premiered a concert piece of mine for 80 voices. I set the Beatitudes, and my first way into being a musician was a jazz trumpet player. So I actually wrote myself into the piece. I played flugelhorn and a little bit of piano with the choir. I saw you in Las Vegas, which is another exciting week. Leonard Slatkin conducted the symphony I wrote for his 80th birthday. And now I'm back in New York City getting ready for something else that's exciting on the concert music side. I've written a series of piano etudes. The first record was called the New York Etudes, and the second record is called the New York Etudes Volume 2. And even though trumpet is my first instrument, I've really loved performing and writing these pieces I'm playing. The singles are coming out on a bi-weekly basis. Actually, we have a new one coming out this week, River. Album will be out on March 27th, and I'll be doing four shows over 2 nights through this wonderful concert series called the Death of Classical series that Andrew Elsley started quite a long time ago in New York. I'm going to be playing piano in a crypt underneath a church in Harlem.
Oh, wow.
Which I can't wait. Yeah, doesn't it sound cool? I just can't wait to hear what it sounds like,
Right.
And so, that's sort of the concert side. But on the film side, again, I warned you, I'm always doing a lot. So I'm going to give you the list, my friend.
Good. It's exciting.
I just recorded a score for a wonderful new documentary about Rod Serling, the man who created the Twilight Zone series.
Oh, sure.
He's a fascinating writer, thinker, artist, a real cultural icon. So that's just been announced. It's going to premiere at the South by South Film Festival next month.
Oh, wow.
And, the last thing I'll mention, which is sort of a hybrid of the first two categories, which is a film, but it's also a concert piece. I've done these really fun this is, I think, the fourth silent movie I've done, but I've enjoyed writing new scores for old silent films. And in April in Prague, I will conduct the world premiere of my new score to Fritz Lang's Metropolis for big symphony orchestra.
Oh my God!
With the Czech National Symphony. So I'm just like, the plates are spinning,
Well, that must have been a massive undertaking. Metropolis is huge, and
in every way, visually. It's a 2 hour and 2.5 hour film. The themes are fascinating. Yeah, I just can't. And like I said, it was a big orchestra, so it was quite the project.
Wow, that's amazing. And I knew of your work through, the big stuff, House of Cards and Monk and things like that. But I first became aware of you for Pollock.
Oh, wow. Thanks. Yeah.
I mean, first of all, I just thought the performance by Ed Harris was insane in that movie.
Yeah,
so intense.
Truly.
And I loved the music. And, I obviously pay attention to those sort of things when I'm watching movies. And it's really, it's just great to actually have met you. I didn't make a big deal of it in person, but I'm a big fan.
Likewise, man, what a thrill to hear you play in Las Vegas.
Oh,
man.
stop.
You were phenomenal. But I'm so happy to hear about Pollock, and I just want to talk about it for a quick second because
sure,
I'm so glad that's how you got to know my music because, listen, there's a certain you work hard, and I've certainly worked hard for a long time, but there are some strokes of fate and luck that intersect in one's life. And the opportunity to do that film so early in my career, really, that's the reason I've had the career I had. That film got seen by a lot of people, obviously, and it really put me on the map in a lot of wonderful ways in Hollywood early in my career, just around the year 2000, I guess it came out. So
right. And, you know, that's the thing that a lot of people that are successful that I've met in show business, let's say, overall, not as musicians, but often people that have achieved a level of success forget that many times it's being in the right place at the right time, or it's just a fluke. And they could just as easily have had no achievements. I mean, you know, still have been exactly the same level of musician or entertainer or performer. But if that one guy hadn't walked in that one night who happened to have one thing that he wanted to do, you know, you could still be, you know, fighting. I mean, it's, you know, with me, I mean, you know, first of all, I never expected I would have a career in show business. You know what I mean? I thought I would be a jazz musician and I'm certainly am, but I thought that would be everything. You know, I would live a life of being on the road and playing gigs.
Yeah.
And it wasn't, I mean, it was more crazy than I can even, when I look back on it, you know, I did a jazz cruise in 1994 and became friendly with a writer for Jazz Times magazine, Neil Tesser, who had written the Playboy Guide to Jazz and was a, you know, well-known guy. And we hit it off, and he said, you know, well, you should play the Green Mill in Chicago. And I said, okay, you know, and one thing led to another, and we became pretty good friends, Neil and I. And he called me up one day and he said, look, you know Oscar Peterson. He said, I'm writing the liner notes for one of these Verve Master Edition reissues of On the Town with Oscar Peterson Trio. And what can you tell me about Oscar? What can I write about Oscar that no one writes about? And I spent an hour and a half on the phone with him talking about his arrangements for the trio, because everyone talks about his technical prowess. Everyone talks about his, you know, his command of the instrument. I said, nobody talks about how tightly those trios were organized. You know, the key changes every
chamber
8
music,
bars.
chamber music. No, it was, masterful. Yeah.
And we had a long conversation about that. And the CD came out and the liner notes were all about me. And I didn't expect that. And then a magician, friend of Penn's, who was also a jazz piano player, bought the Oscar Peterson CD, read the liner notes about me, brought Penn to see me play at this horrible gig that I had in Vegas. And so it was just a complete fluke, you know?
Boom, boom,
I would have never.
Right? How wonderful.
You know,
that's life, though.
Yeah, I guess it is, you know? Yeah. But I'm so lucky. And people forget that it's not luck, but it's, I mean, you know, as they say,
it's serendipity.
You know, it's serendipity, but it's also being prepared if the opportunity arises. So, because if all that had happened and Penn didn't like the way I played, it wouldn't have mattered, you know?
End of story. It doesn't go the way it did for you.
Yeah. But, well, clearly, I mean, you're incredibly talented, and Pollock just brought you to more people's attention and set the stage for you to have this wonderful career. So you went, I'm just jumping around because I like to think of it more like just a conversation, and I go everywhere in conversations, but,
like jazz, my friend, like we're doing jazz.
We are verbal jazz. Was Ken Nordine, word jazz. Ken Nordine, had an album called Word Jazz. But, cool. What brought you to New York? I mean, you're a California guy. I mean, you were born and raised in California. Well, what brought you to, I mean, obviously you went to Eastman, but did that continue? Did you go back to California after college, or did you go right to New York?
There was a bit of an interlude, but it's sort of fun because in some ways, in terms of my ultimate place I wanted to live, I'm kind of back home, because after graduating from Eastman, my wife Joan and I, who met at Eastman, we've now been married 41 years, which is amazing.
Wow. Wait a minute, you're only 30 years old. How can that be?
Yeah. 62, my friend. 62.
Yeah, same age as me.
And we lived in New York City for a brief time because I was a jazz trumpet player, and that was sort of my city. Joan, who's a wonderful soprano, won a job at the San Francisco Opera Chorus. So we spent a few years, about a year and a half in New York, got my first jazz trumpet record deal. We went to San Francisco. Joan was in the opera chorus for several years. I started getting my feet into film and TV a little bit there, kept making jazz records, and then we moved to LA in 1991, I believe. And we were there for the good part of like 30 years. And I think I'm glad when you talked about luck and place and the serendipity, because it would have been really easy at my level in the film and television world to just kind of keep doing that. But again, I said at the beginning, I'm not satisfied just to keep doing the same thing over and over again, especially if I've kind of figured it out. I love to solve puzzles. And really, for the last 10 or 15 years, getting back to the concert stage, performing, conducting, all of these things have really been pulling me in wonderful ways. And so, of course, the pandemic happened, which was a big part of our decision, but we actually moved to New York City when everybody else was running out. We moved in 2021.
Wow.
And there was several reasons. I mean, the first was family. My wife wanted to be close to her mom, who at the time was still alive but very obviously needed some help in Connecticut.
Right.
So that was a wonderful reason to go out. We had 3 wonderful years with her before she passed. But it got us back east. And so on the personal side, that was really meaningful for a whole lot of reasons, for her and me. Right. But on an artistic side, even though that was the impetus, we were also starting to think like, we did LA. We've done that. I don't need to keep doing the same thing over and over again. And it felt like a nice time to sort of shake things up and return to a place, New York City, that represented some other parts of my career, the performer, the conductor, and of course the composer. And I can already see, it's been almost, I guess we're going to our 50th year living here, or 50th year. I can already see the fruits of that, being in a different place, meeting people, these chance meetings, all the things that happen.
Right.
Wonderful things. And so for me, we've raised our son, we're empty nesters. So there's a whole bunch of reasons. I think, New York is really a special place. Although I always say I don't miss the city, but I miss my friends, because of course I've got a bunch of friends in Los Angeles. But, artistically, even though I've only been here now for 5 years, sort of not counting the young, poor years in the 80s, which was exciting, but a different version of the city, because we were just starting out and very, very much finding our way. But New York City feels much more like my hometown, in terms of a place where my soul is. That really, Los Angeles, as great as that town has been to me, I never felt like that was where I fit. That was exactly my home. I'd be there forever. And of course, I haven't been. I'm not. It's a place where I've sojourned for 30 wonderful years, but it's a chapter, and a wonderful chapter, and I still go back there and have a place there. But New York's really, man, it's incredible.
Well, Penn likes to say there's New York and there's every place else.
He's right. And I agree with him. Yeah.
It's very true. I mean, I hadn't been back there since we went back in 2015 for 3 months to be on Broadway, and I hadn't been back there in 15 years, because I left New York in '99 to come out here, and I was shocked. I mean, I was in New York in the '80s when you were there, and you wouldn't go near Hell's Kitchen.
No, it was a really edgy, rough city. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the most frightening moments of my adult life was probably in 1982 or 83, when I was going down from Boston to New York all the time, and I got lost and wound up in Harlem at like 12 o'clock in the afternoon on a Tuesday afternoon. And it was like entering the moon. I was frightened beyond belief, because I didn't know where I was. I didn't know how to get back on the highway. I didn't know what I was going to do. And it did not look like the kind of neighborhood where you could stop and ask for directions.
Right.
And so, but now, I mean, and this is 11 years ago now, we were there, all of Hell's Kitchen is gentrified and expensive.
Big time.
I mean, the whole city. But I love New York. We were just back there. We did a night at Radio City.
Yeah, wonderful.
I was shocked at how less. My friend John Keel from Soundtrack Recording Studios, he said, after the pandemic, it's different because of just the volume of people that would be on the street When we were there in
Yeah.
2015, you couldn't walk down the street at any hour of the
Right.
day. And it's
Right.
thinned out dramatically. And it's a different vibe now, even than a decade ago. But it's still New York. I mean,
Yeah.
it's the things that LA is as you say, it's wonderful and it's been very good to you. And there's this spread out feel of
Yes,
LA
exactly.
that is you never get the sense of community
No,
that
you
you
don't.
get in New York. I mean, you
Yeah.
know, the fact that you can walk anywhere in New York in an afternoon,
Yep.
and the culture and everything else. I mean, everyone knows
Yeah.
this. I'm not trying to
Yeah.
advertise for New York, but it's just I understand why you went back in terms
Yeah,
of
and I think
those
no,
reasons.
and absolutely. And I think as an artist, I think every artist works differently, but to me, place is always a big factor.
Mhm.
I love to travel. I get inspired by being in different places. Like there's just this energy you get, I think, artistically when you're sort of
Yeah.
new
Uh,
stimulation, new people, new environments, seasons, weather. It's all sorts of
right.
things that affect my work. And I'll give you another example of another wonderful project that I didn't mention because it hasn't happened, hasn't been performed yet. But certainly one of the pieces I'm working on right now would have never happened because it involves an orchestra I became involved with in New York City, the wonderful orchestra, the Orpheus Chamber Orchestra.
Mhm.
And they've commissioned me. I'm writing a saxophone concerto for Branford Marsalis, which I'm
Oh,
really
wow.
excited about.
Yeah, yeah.
And I've always loved Branford's playing. He's just one of my favorites. And
Well, me too.
you know, yeah,
And for
yeah,
good reason. I mean, you know, he seems to me, I mean, I'll admit that I haven't paid that much attention to him in the recent years, but certainly, he seems to be that continuation of the Sonny Rollins ethos. You know what I mean?
yeah,
And that
exactly.
kind of, that like I think I don't know if you know Makoto Ozone.
Sure,
But
yeah,
but
wonderful player. Yeah,
yeah. Well, when he was at Berkeley, he before he met and started working with Gary Burton, he was really to me like the next generation of Oscar Peterson. He could do everything that Oscar had done in terms of the technique and everything, but the next generation of harmonic ideas. You know what I mean? Um,
yeah,
then he went in a different direction with Gary. But Branford, I mean, that sound and that control and that, the command of the instrument is, it's very Sonny Rollins like to me. And I just love
yeah,
his playing. So
yeah,
uh
yeah.
I look forward to that. So jumping back to New York in the 80s when you were fresh out of school, did you just try to did you just try to go there and did you have a reason for going? I mean, did you have a connection or did you just show up and knock on doors?
It's funny. I'd graduated from Eastman. I knew I wanted to be a composer. I knew I wanted to be a trumpet player. I mean, especially back then, the
Mhm.
trumpet was like really a big part of my pursuits. And I there was a wonderful teacher I had long before I went to Eastman who mentored me in some of the Jamie Ingersoll camps when I was a kid, by the
Uh-huh.
name of John McNeil, wonderful jazz trumpet player.
Mhm.
And John lived in Brooklyn, and he was he was the first person that kind of helped me, gave me some numbers, some names.
Mhm.
I had a bunch of big band charts from Eastman. I was pretty, I had a quick good entrepreneurial spirit even back then, and I had already published a lot of my big band charts. And by the time I got out of Eastman, I had a whole book of big band charts. So I did a rehearsal band and called a lot of John's sort of
Wow.
cool New York friends, and Marvin
Mhm.
Stamm I'd met, so Marvin helped me a little bit.
Uh-huh.
But it's so funny because we were just watching the well, we didn't watch the whole game, but we finally watched the first half of the Super Bowl and the halftime show because everybody was talking about how great it is. So I wanted to see it. We're watching
Sure.
Bad Bunny, and I was thinking, Mike, because my wife and I were joking about it because here I am, very much a gringo, but I grew up in California, and my main way of paying the rent in New York City back in the '80s was salsa bands. I
Wow.
played on those
Uh-huh.
on the weekends, and I loved it. I loved that
Sure.
music. I even did quite a bit of Latin music in California, but I
Mhm.
loved that music. And that was sort of the main bread and butter. My wife got some day jobs, doing various office jobs. Her career took off singing classical music. She did a lot of freelancing with a lot of the choirs that were doing stuff.
Mhm.
But I was really fortunate because there's a wonderful saxophonist who actually lives in New York. He's still a good friend by the name of David Mann. And David and I were friends from our childhood. Actually, we met at one of those Jamie Abersol camps where Jamie
Oh,
had
wow.
an advanced jazz camp one year, and so we as two hot young lion high school students we met. Long story short, David introduced me to a guy at Island Records who became the label that first signed me as a solo jazz trumpet artist, and I had my first record deal in New York City back in 19 I don't know, whatever it was, 6 or 7,
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that's fascinating. And that's another thing I want to ask you about, because as a kid in California, what got you into music? I mean, were your parents involved in music, or was it just around the house?
All of that, not professionally, but definitely. And I believe I don't know your family story, but I think there's a profound connection a lot of times between DNA and musicianship, or possibly that DNA also plays into a lot of environmental things. My mom was a wonderful pianist. There was a piano and organ in the house. So I was around it all the time. Both my grandmothers played piano, and my grandmother on my father's side, Irene, was amazing. She was living in San Francisco and then eventually San Leandro during my childhood. And she could improvise on the piano. She could do anything. She loved jazz. She was just a real buoyant. She was sort of born in the wrong century to be who she was, So when I first started playing trumpet, I'll never forget this. She went into her little stack of vinyls that she had, and it was maybe a quarter of what I see behind you there. I don't know if those are all records or books.
Oh, no, it was CDs, but yeah.
CDs, okay. But she pulled out 2 records, and the first one she gave me was Sketches of Spain. And I think the second one was Kind of Blue.
Oh, geez.
And can you imagine your grandmother giving you those? Like being hip enough to know what those were? And gosh.
But also, she couldn't have picked 2 better titles to give to a young musician. You know what I mean?
Player, and composer too.
Yeah.
I mean, the composer, I just wore Kind of Blew Out. That was like completely blew my mind, of course. And then this is the kicker. And then I think a few visits later, she gave me one. I said, "These are great, Grandma. Thanks." She reached in and gave me one more. It was Miles Davis live at the Black Hawk. And then she said, "I was there when he recorded that."
No kidding.
She was a very a religious woman. She was a Christian Scientist, so she didn't drink at all. But they let her go into the clubs and just sit at the bar, and they knew she wasn't going to drink, but they let her sit at the bar and listen.
Wow!
And so, listen, and then after she passed, this is even it gets a little crazier because I didn't know this during her lifetime, but back in the early 2000s, I was doing my very first silent film score commission I did for this wonderful Buster Keaton film, The General.
Oh yeah.
My aunt created as a train trace. It's a really fun film, masterpiece, really. And so my aunt told me, who's also passed, but she was alive at the time. She said, "Your grandmother played piano for silent movies." I had no idea.
Really?
And it was like the bells went off, ding, 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 ding.
Yeah,
because
sure.
when you look at the way I work, I'm sitting in front of a big screen here and computers, and when a modern film composer works, it's not unlike the silent movie player. We're sitting at the piano, looking at the screen,
yeah, reacting to the action.
Of course, we're composing and refining it, but so
right.
I am so grateful that I had the ancestors really on a bunch of ways that I had,
right.
And another just wonderful confluence of a lot of things.
Yeah. Well, just to break off for 1 second. So now your score for The General, can you watch the movie with that score anywhere? Is that been released on any kind of
we
medium,
haven't released it. I think if you go on my website and you go to the videos tab, I think I've got the whole thing up there.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's good.
You can watch it. It's with the Florida State. It's with the University Orchestra, so there weren't any problems licensing. So that was really fun. It's a really fun movie. I've conducted it several times, and it's fun. There is one commercially released silent movie score that you'll love this because there's a jazz connection. I actually premiered this in Carnegie Hall a few years ago with a wonderful big band and a choir. But I did this new score for the cabinet of Dr. Caligari.
Oh, really?
And so there is I don't know if it's available digitally, but if you're a Blu-ray aficionado, there's a wonderful new Kino Lorber edition of the cabinet of Dr. Caligari with my score. And I also did did an audio commentary about writing it. But that was super fun.
Oh, wow.
And
I'll look into that.
And I'm hoping, we're coming up on the 100-year anniversary of Metropolis, so I'm going to record my score earlier into the month in April, and I'm hoping that by the time somebody gets ready to release this, they're working on a new version of Metropolis to celebrate the 100-year anniversary. That hopefully my score will be available
Oh, that'd be
to
great.
see.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm
Yeah. Well, and so you're digging into kind of Blue and Sketches of Spain, courtesy of your grandmother.
yeah.
How old were you then?
This was early on, probably just kind of entering middle school, like 7th and 8th grade.
Okay. All right.
And this is a great sort of biographical point too, in terms of, you always, it's always clear in the rearview mirror where you came from. But when I look back at of course I got in the jazz band and started playing, and I started improvising on the trumpet mic. And it's really when I started improvising that I sort of really discovered I was a composer. It's like something came out of me. I didn't know,
Right.
certainly didn't know hardly anything about chord scale relationships, but I had a good ear and had a good sense of that sense of improvisation, and I just loved it. And so really, I feel like that discovering improvisation, of course, then really going down the jazz trumpet rabbit hole, and of course the jazz piano rabbit hole too, a little bit, because I was always playing piano, and the piano is my instrument as a composer, although I never really studied formally on piano as I have on trumpet. And really so those things all sort of played into each other. The music my grandmother shared, my parents even, they had, they were children of, I guess they were born in the 30s, so they came of age during the big band era, so they had a couple big band records I listened to, I loved, So really, this if I wasn't a jazz musician, I would not be the person I am now as a composer. It's really sort of a huge part of my musical vocabulary and my artistic sort of personality. Even though a lot of stuff I doesn't write you couldn't call jazz. I feel like being a jazz artist is a huge part of everything.
Right, and it informs everything you're doing.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
and I mean, and also the pieces that you've written so much stuff that includes improvised sections. That it's apparent, and so your folks were just regular people. You know what I mean? Just I mean, they were
exactly.
civilians.
They were civilians. My dad was a mechanical engineer, and mom was a full-time mom and a part-time church secretary for several years.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, my dad was a greeting card salesman. But we, my dad was a good amateur singer, and I was lucky enough to grow up with. I mean, he loved music and made sure that I heard the right things. I grew up with 2-player pianos in my house.
Oh, how fun! That must have been a thrill. Wow.
We had about 1,000 piano rolls. So,
oh my gosh,
we had
that explains a lot.
Yeah, we had a standard 88 note upright in the basement, and then when I was about 6 or 7, and had been playing for a couple of years, he got a Weber, a Duart Weber, Aeolian Duart Weber, which was a reproducing player. I don't know if you know what those were, but
no, I don't.
Well, in the 20s, the very, very wealthy people, this was their high fidelity pursuit. It was a piano. It's called an expression piano or a reproducing piano. It got louder and softer and sustained and didn't sound mechanical. So
that's amazing. Wow.
People, so Gershwin recorded Rhapsody in Blue for it, and believed that Rubinstein and they were brought in to New York to record these, and it was it was like a disc clavier now, but
exactly.
the same.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, and it was a wonderful way to grow up with that stuff, because my fascination from the time I was 2 or 3 years old was watching the keys go down and then trying to do it. But
what a great way to learn. Yeah.
It wasn't until, it was before I made a bunch of piano rolls for QRS, the piano roll company, in the 80s. But it wasn't until I was probably 10 or 15 that I realized, wait a minute, there's 11 or 12 notes going down at the same time. How is that possible?
Yeah.
And then I realized that they punched in there, and but it was a pursuit. When I first heard guys like Earl Hines and Oscar and Dave McKenna and those guys, the idea of the completeness on the instrument, the idea of playing the complete instrument, wasn't foreign to me because I had grown up listening to it, and it was always what I searched for. I mean, I'm not going to get myself in trouble by saying something stupid. But as much as I loved Bud Powell and all the bop players, the lack of the lower end of the piano
Yeah.
being played when,
Yeah.
because I mean, growing up, it was Teddy Wilson, it was Fats Waller, it was, Tatum, it was people
Yeah.
that played the entire instrument, and
Exactly. Yeah.
it felt a little bereft of bottom end for
Yeah.
me. Um,
Yeah.
but anyhow, but that's a tangent. But I think that I think that environment plays a big part when you're
Oh,
a kid. Um, I played in rock bands and I grew up with people, my friends all listened to Led Zeppelin and, Leonard Skinner and all those guys and the Stones and I listened to all that too. But I also listened to Fats Waller and Teddy Wilson and Art Tatum. And
yeah.
I think that just having an environment where everything is available to you is really important as a young musician. And I think that that's today more than everything's available now, and it's
Yeah.
almost overwhelming,
Yeah.
for young people. I think they have to consciously pick a genre or a because everything. I mean, it's embarrassing. It's you can put on Apple Music and listen to Bix Beiderbecke, or you can listen to Bad Money. Not to be too
Exactly.
illiterate about it,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's all there. And if when we were kids, if you wanted to hear a record, you had to go to the record store and seek it out. Someone had to tell you about it, and you had to, save up the $6.99 to buy the
Yeah.
LP and bring it
Yeah.
home.
That's especially with classical music or jazz. That's what I would do. I would go buy some things that I really wanted to learn. Or I was lucky. There was a public library in my hometown of Castro Valley, California, which is
Mhm,
a relatively small suburb near Oakland, California.
mhm.
But for some reason, somebody was buying a lot of cool stuff there. They got this around the time of the ECM label was getting a lot
Oh,
of
sure.
traction in the early 70s. So I remember getting Jarrett Records and DeJohnette and Ralph
Right,
Towner. And also I remember getting Alban Berg's Wozzeck. They had these operas. And so
right.
it was really, I was always looking for discovering new music and finding it.
Mhm.
But it was certainly not as easy as it is now. I think there's a problem now with it. Like you say, it's overwhelming, and there's no curation, and there's no sense of what's worth listening to versus what's,
Right,
you have option anxiety. I think is a big part of it. Yeah.
right. And I also, without going too far down that road, there's no more gatekeepers.
No, big time. Yeah.
The idea
Yeah.
that you become proficient on your instrument, and then someone sees something in you that they feel should be developed and nurtured
Yeah.
is gone.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
I've got a YouTube channel, so I'm going to put out
Yeah.
whatever I want. And
Yeah.
I mean, and I mean, yes, it's wonderful that opportunity is available to everyone,
Yeah.
and the cream of the
Exactly.
crop does rise. But
I believe
as I
that
said,
over time, but it can be a big mess in the way to
it's
that.
this horrible, horrible deluge of stuff that, you know, y- y- it's I don't want to say, as um, as we get into our 60s, time becomes more valuable, and the amount of
Yes.
time that I will spend seeking out new things is not nearly the amount of time that I spend listening to things that bring me joy from the past. You know,
Exactly. Yeah.
uh, and that's a fault. I mean, I hope that in my 70s I'm still looking for new exciting things, but
Yeah.
I also sure do love putting on Bill Evans live at the Village Vanguard. You know what I mean? And it evokes a lifetime of memories of listening to it in the past, and and also the musicianship and everything that those things
Yeah.
matter. And that
Yeah.
idea that I can, I mean, I hear so many people that are popular that I don't hear anything that speaks to me. Not to say that they're not valuable or not that they're not contributing. It just doesn't speak to me anymore. And I don't want to shut down completely because I'll hear a young musician that just blows me away. But 8 times out of 10, I'm left a little wanting.
Yeah. That's a good point. No,
Well, and I mean, you came up the traditional route that I grew up believing in and that I came through, which was you go to New York or you go somewhere and you get a record deal and someone says you're good enough or you're at least there's the promise of something in your playing that leads us to believe we'll invest in you. And
yeah.
that's a thing that sort of has gone by the wayside or it could become more commercial. I mean, back in the days when labels made classical music and jazz, they made those records because they felt a responsibility, not just because they needed the tax write-off, you know what I mean, to offset the Springsteen albums. But there was an idea that, see, and I'm going way down a path here, but there was an idea that, labels like CBS and Nonesuch and all these labels, they existed to serve the music, that they thought that it was an important part of society to have these things available, this level of culture and art. And it didn't matter if it made money because it was supposed to be out there. And that's sort of all, I mean, at least to my point, the music and the musicians that make it haven't gone anywhere.
Sure.
But the industry has moved on. We don't,
Yeah.
You're not getting 2 billion streams. We're not interested in you. And it's sad, but I didn't mean to bring it down, but it's just.
Well, I'll say one thing that, I agree. And it's funny because all of this leads me to a realization I had about that came back to the pandemic, Mike, which was I had a sense, and I think this plays into the Etudes record in a way, those compositions. And I think about the Beatitudes, which I just did in Los Angeles. But the pandemic for me, it was horrible that we had what happened, and it was a lot of tragedy. But there was a clarity which it gave me about a few things, and one was it stripped away any of my appetite for artifice or something that doesn't deeply move me. And I sort of felt like coming out of that, and also it was sort of, I felt like I had to sort of restart and reinvent because of course. I didn't. A lot of artists have said this, but during the pandemic, I didn't really feel like writing that much. I mean, when I had a deadline or commission, I did it, but I wasn't I wasn't inspired because for me, it was about the experience of making music with people and for an audience or in a performance. But I did feel like the clarity I got out of that experience was that I want to do music for the rest of my time, whatever that is. That really comes from a place that is about a honest, authentic communication of some sort, an emotion, feeling, or something that I feel really justifies its place. And of course, this is a crazy thing. It's insane. You give yourself these little, goals, but to me, I think it was really helpful to sort of go back to that because the idea. And again, you mentioned eggs. Life is finite. We only have so much time, and so as an artist, I think this idea of wanting to really spend that time on things that I believe in, that have a reason for being listened to now, or maybe 10 years from now, or even 100 years from now. Of course, nobody can tell what that is, but those are the things that matter to me, and it when you hear it. When it doesn't matter if it was made this week or 10 years ago or 100 years ago. When you hear a piece of music that moves you so deeply and it connects to something universal and profound that it's got that thing. So whatever that thing is, that's my North Star. And I guess it's always sort of been my North Star, but I guess my feeling is, one of the things interesting to me about that aesthetic is that it doesn't, I think complexity is sometimes overrated in music. Some of the simplest things are some of the hardest to do, and that's why I think writing film music that's really strong and listenable and memorable is actually quite difficult because you don't have the luxury of often a lot of complexity. You have to say it very cleanly and very. There's a poetry to that. It's like writing good pop music. So I feel like things that I do that are maybe more like studies in simplicity, like the piano etudes. I keep going back to those because they're so relentlessly simple. I mean, they're within my ability on the instrument. So I'm trying to put in them there's something I think a lot about artistically, which is simple but not simple-minded.
Well, okay, right.
That's something I love. When something has this beautiful poetic simplicity, but it's also deep. That's some of the music that really, really speaks to me, I think, a lot.
Well, and to throw it into the jazz piano world, which I know a little bit about, is the master of that, Count Basie.
Bingo.
I mean,
bingo.
And by the way, it's not that well known that Count Basie could play. He could play. I don't want to say at Tatum's level or at Oscar Peterson's level, but he certainly could play at Teddy Wilson's level and Fats Waller and all of the stride stuff. He was a monster piano player.
But that was a choice.
Yeah, it was a choice, and
Yeah.
he pared it down and he thought, what fits with this band?
Yeah.
God, I was listening just the other day to the reason I brought him up too is I was just listening to the opening set of Count Basie at the Sands when they backed Sinatra.
Oh, wow.
That album came out.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
and I mean, he would just hit like, the band is singing and it comes down to nothing and he hits like one note, a high G.
Plink.
And
but
it's perfect.
So perfect.
Yeah.
It's so perfect.
It's you can't I play a lot of notes, but I play a lot of notes in context of I'm trying to get a magic audience excited. You know what I mean?
No, exactly, which is wonderful. No, there's no problem with that. That's great too.
But during the pandemic, I made an album of all solo piano stuff in my living room. That's very pared down because that's where I was feeling in the middle of the pandemic. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And it wasn't dark, but it was not, show-offy. It was a lot of ballads because that's the only thing I don't get to do in the Penn and Teller show is play any ballads.
Yeah.
And I miss that.
Yeah.
But your composing leaves room for different soloists to add or subtract to that in terms of how many notes they're, how the statements that they're going to make, how much complexity they want to bring to it, and that it's it's a different style of. It's very organic, the stuff that you're doing, and I'm jumping around a little bit too, but you know what I mean. It has an authentic feel to it that there's not a lot of artifice in your.
Well,
your
I hope not. Thank you. That's really kind. I will say that I think of painting a lot. Because I love painting, and that was another connection in my family history. A lot of my fathers took up oil painting late in his life. Both my grandmothers were wonderful painters.
Oh,
and so there was some sense of and it's funny given the Pollock connection, right? But there was some sense in which I think a lot about when I write a piece of music. It's like when you look at a really great painting, it's so satisfying. It's not like it's spoon feeding you, but a really great painting has a sense of structure and form, and it doesn't matter whether it's a Pollock or a completely abstract piece, like a Gerhard Richter or a Picasso or it doesn't matter or that or a classic Renaissance painting. But a really great painting, it like sort of pulls you in, and it's sort of like there's a place where your eye goes first, right? And then that's the thing that kind of like first grabs you, but then you start to explore and wander around a little bit. And I think a lot about when I'm writing more complex music, whether it's a big orchestration or I think about it that way. I want to, certainly the symphony you heard in Las Vegas is a good example. I want, it's a much more lively. Sometimes there's a lot of layers. So I want sometimes I want the cacophony and it's fun, but oftentimes I want there to be a story that the ear can follow somehow in a fun way through the piece. And so that's something I think a lot about is like an organic sense of.
Sure. Yeah. That's fun. Yeah. Well, now here's a totally different off the wall question. It's an inside, this is for my own edification. What do you use to compose with? Do you use Sibelius or do you use you're not pulling out staff paper and a couple of sharpened pencils?
Yeah, no. Although, it's funny, the only time I'd done that for a long time and probably 30 years was the piano etudes because I wrote those at the piano.
Oh,
so finally, it was so fun. I just I'm still all of those. They start on pencil. I have sheet music down there. I write them at the piano. But of course, no. My main tools for really most of my career as a film composer and a composer I use Logic, and I've just loved this program. It's so great for my workflow as a film composer. It's also got a decent notation and module built in, and it's funny because when I do films, I actually do all my orchestration right inside Logic. So when I record, I like to record at home. I'm in my studio here in New York, and I actually recorded the orchestra for All Her Fault right in this room. I'm a little bit of a mad scientist. I like producing and engineering. But even when I write concert pieces, I start them in Logic because it's just so natural to me. It disappears. It's not even there. I'm just thinking music.
Wow.
It's second nature. So concert music, I write into Logic and then eventually gets put into Sibelius for the final orchestration.
Okay. Wow. I have to look into Logic then. But I remember Logic when 20 years ago. I didn't even know that. And so now, what are you doing? Are you doing any more TV stuff?
I don't. I think they told me they want to do something more with All Her Fault, so we'll see what happens with that.
Okay.
I'm waiting to see. But right now it was just the Serling documentary, and I'm okay
Right.
with that.
Sure.
It's definitely I enjoy not being as booked up, let's say,
Right.
writing for the screen as I was in the past.
Right. Right. And that's another thing.
know.
That's another question for regular people that are listening to this. People that aren't inside the. When you were writing on House of Cards,
Yeah.
Um, did you just write all the cues as they did the episodes, or do you do the season as
Yeah.
a whole, or how does that all work?
Yeah, and it's so funny because even House of Cards is sort of what I would call the mid-range example of workflow, because that's a lot like the premium cable shows I did, like Rome or
Right.
Carnival earlier in my career.
Yeah.
But you have a little more time because they only do maybe 8 to 10 to 12. I think House of Cards most of our seasons were 13 episodes,
Right.
12 to 13. But that happens over maybe 8 months. So yeah, they come in you usually come in one at a time.
Mhm.
Because the shooting schedules versus post schedules, usually by the time we were sort of really finishing a season, I'd do maybe 2 House of Cards episodes per month on average.
Okay.
So that would sort of be the cadence. And again, yeah, these are all, it's almost like a production line,
Yeah.
So you work in order, they script them and then they shoot them in order. So I get a story Bible at the beginning, so I sort of know the overall arc of a season.
Mhm.
But then I compose them as they're being finished, and I really love that. I love that. I love the discovery. I mean, again, being very comfortable with the uncertainty of where something's going to go.
Right.
I'm fine with that. I mean, I've become much better at sort of having a sense of developing some ideas that might be useful later on, or discovering something. One of the things I do like about my workflow when I work in Logic, and I started doing this a long time ago, but I work in what's called timeline mode in Logic. So instead of having each cue be a separate file, it's one big file that's a timeline of the whole score.
Right.
And that is really wonderful for me. It's very efficient, but it also helps me sort of see the whole universe of the score as a connected
Right. Yes.
thing.
Yes.
Wow. Obviously certain cues are maybe variations of cues that came earlier, and it's wonderful. And it's very fun because this miniseries I mentioned, All Her Fault, starring Sarah Snook, was, I guess, the closest thing to that I've done in quite a long time. It was a really high-end, great acting, great scripted miniseries, 8 episodes. That was a little crazier in terms of schedule because I got hired last summer, but I think I replaced somebody, to be honest with you, which happens quite often,
Yes, I've heard that. Yeah.
You're right. So so that I didn't have a lot of time. So I think the whole score, it was 8 episodes and a lot of music in each episode. Those were really quick, And so, there's something I like about the cadence of sometimes doing television. And this is even more intense when I did sort of like Monk or Ugly Betty, where you may be doing 19 episodes, or Ugly Betty, I think in most of those seasons it was 23 episodes.
Wow.
That's almost like on a weekly basis. You get an episode, you spot it.
Yep.
You got 30, 40 minutes of score to do. And It's on the air, and maybe on the air in 9 or 10 days. I mean, it's crazy.
Right.
It's like boom, boom, boom. Monk, very similar. So, being a jazz musician, the ideas come quickly, and I'm a fast writer. So, obviously that job has served me very well, and
sure,
I've enjoyed that about it. It's funny because I remember early on in my career, and I've done a lot of wonderful films too, and but done a lot of television. I remember a film, I got hired on film with somebody, and he said to me, he goes, because he came from television, he goes, I hired you because you're a great TV composer. And I coming from television, he said, I know if you can do TV well, you can do anything well. I think that's true. I think it's kind of one of the hardest things to do well, because again, the deadline pressure, you don't have a lot of time.
Right.
How do you make the quality as much as you can in a sort of, compressed
absolutely
schedule, shall we say?
Yeah. It's I mean, it's the same thing with coming from studio work that I did in New York. The idea that I was on a TV show every day in Boston, and had to come up with a bunch of different things. But
oh wow,
all of that played into when I'm writing stuff for Penn and Teller.
Sure.
when there's, there's new tricks and they say, what do you think behind this? And, and that all comes into play, but I'll just show up and, for the TV, for Fool Us, their TV show, if they're doing something that they need music on, that's it's all part of being an improvisational based musician. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We don't have the guardrails, or that some do,
Yeah,
or
in a good way. In a good
um,
way. Yeah.
yeah, it's a good, yeah, very good. Well, I'm gonna veer one more thing off if it's okay with you, and if you, but you've had some health issues, and
Yeah. I'll fine to
you
talk
know,
about this, by the
I
way. Yeah.
okay. Well, how are you dealing with the MS? And I mean, you look perfectly healthy, and obviously are doing great, but you've been dealing with it for quite a while now, almost 20 years, right?
Yeah, I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis back in 2007. So it's, I think,
Wow.
18 or 19 years. And of course, it was very terrifying in the beginning.
Yeah.
And, knock on something, I've done really well with it. But, I really, listen, I'm glad that there were disease modifying medications that were
Hmm.
developed around the time I diagnosed. I've responded to one of those medications very well. But I think
Okay.
when you have something serious, that's a chronic illness, and like a lot of people, I was in my 40s when I got it diagnosed. Some people with MS get diagnosed even younger, 20s or 30s.
Right.
But I feel like wellness with MS, it's a whole bunch of things. It's nutrition, it's diet, it's exercise.
Hmm.
But for me, Mike, I really have a profound belief that a big part of my wellness with living with this has been music, has been staying
Hmm.
active
Hmm.
musically. And
Right.
I really, it's anecdotal, but I will say, I've met so many neurologists, including some of the younger generation neurologists in New York City, who are brilliant and very scientific. But they are some of the first people to wave their head, shake their heads, and say yes, they believe that, because
Hmm.
there's a bunch of theories regarding. Well, for example, this wonderful doctor in Columbia, Claire Riley, he has a whole theory about cognitive reserve. The amount of sort of brain architecture that's built going into something like this really serves you well.
Hmm.
Because one of the things that happens if your lesions are in the brain, which they are in mine, although I've been so lucky not to really develop any new lesions since that first diagnosis 20 years ago,
Oh,
is
good.
that we know the brain rewires around these areas. It's called brain
Hmm.
plasticity. And so that happens naturally.
Hmm.
And what I would say naturally, but with effort, and we see this in stroke patients, or people can rewire, with sometimes a lot
Right.
of effort. You can use a part of your brain that was built for one thing for another thing. It's pretty
Right.
miraculous how this happens, right?
Yeah.
So that's been obviously happening in a good way. But I've always been a public person about this, because I think it's important to not
Hmm.
keep it a secret. To also give people with hope that have this, because it's not a fun life, and certainly a lot of people that have this have it in a much more profound, or there's more visual disability.
Right.
And the Piano Etudes project for me is really special, because this particular project, I feel, has been enabled me to share more intimately about my journey. I
Hmm.
think also part of what happened to me is, I started that project not thinking about what the theme of it was, but I did want to be a better pianist, because I thought I'll be a better composer. But as I started, after I got writing them and really getting ready to record them, something else happened when I was playing. Is because it is sort of there's a calm set of music, and there
Hmm.
was this sort of sense of calm and well-being I felt that was coming through me as a performer, and that it was almost like meditation or mindfulness. The ritual of playing this music was somehow good for me.
Hmm.
And so, another thing about MS is really significant. It's a disease of opportunity, and stress is a huge trigger for people that have MS. It's one of the things that pushes inflammation and can cause a lot of symptoms to flare up. So I really believe this piano playing for me has been a really important part of this next
Right.
era of my life I'm in. And it's also something I just love to do. But yeah, it's not lost on me. A couple things. One is that, I never wanted to see myself as a victim, and I still don't. I never wanted
Hmm.
anybody to hire me because I had a
Right.
disability, or I wanted to hire me because my music's good. That's the only
Right.
reason.
Right.
And
Well,
still is. But
sure.
but I feel like at this point in my life, being vulnerable and honest about a challenge, I think is it's kind of liberating for me. And I'll give
Right.
you a perfect example. When I was in Las Vegas earlier in that same week, that we had this wonderful concert. I gave the program by Etudes, and it was so fun. And there's about 100 people there, and I got to play on the beautiful Steinway D that you heard Olga play Rachmaninoff on later in the week. And so I didn't even know this. I heard they might reach out, but it's about an hour program. I had to do some storytelling and playing, and it was
Right.
a little hard. It was a little harder to read the room as to how much they were responding. But I said, well, I'm going to stay for a few minutes. If anybody wants to do some questions and answers, and like nobody left, and it was so wonderful.
Wow, that's great.
The conversation that happened, but also really special to me is they had reached out to the MS chapter, and so about, I don't know, 6 or 7 people there with multiple sclerosis
Oh,
were sharing, and they came up and saw me after, and it was really, how wonderful that something
yeah,
again. Surprises happen in life. Life is unexpected. So,
it's true.
right? We don't know what,
No,
good or bad, what's going to happen, but you kind of deal
exactly.
with it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I want to thank you so much. I mean, I think this is a great place to just wrap it up because I've taken up an hour of your valuable time. But it's been great, and I look forward to the Metropolis. I hope I get to see that. And everything else that you shared is just been wonderful. And I highly recommend people go search out your stuff on Apple Music and on Spotify and on everything else, and some way to bring your music into their lives because it's really it's worth seeking out. And it's been just such a pleasure, Jeff, to get to know you. And I look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you, Mike. Likewise for me.